You there! Yes, you, Limbus Company player. Do you know what the worst part of every ID is? That's right, they're skill 1. If you're tired of using those sickeningly shallow skills, have I got the product for you. The Discoordinator 2000. Now you can punch, maim, and otherwise kill whoever you want with increased effectiveness. It's fun with your friends. It's fun with your family. Heck, even your dog can use it. So what are you waiting for? Buy the Discoordinator 2000 now for only 16,000 lunacy. Don't you just hate targeted advertising? Anyways, thanks for clicking on this video despite the horrible pun in the title. It was a decision made by 3AM Escu, I blame him. Anyways, I genuinely never thought I would get requests from people to make a video on Discard, since it's quite simple, right? Just get rid of your skill 1s and go ham. Or that's what I thought before I properly tried it. I now know it is a bit more complex than just getting rid of the worst skill. So I'll be going over discard as a mechanic first, then the 3 discard IDs in the game, how best to use them in my opinion, and giving my thoughts on them and discard as a whole. However, to give my thoughts on something, we need to know exactly what it does first. So by the in-game definition, discard deletes skills that fit the description and are selectable during the chaining phase. Let me interject here to explain exactly what this means, since this is a little vague. First of all, deletes skills that fit the description matters on a skill-by-skill basis. Let's look at Molar Otis's skill 3, which says that it discards skills in descending order from all skill slots. This means that any skill can be discarded, starting with skill 3s, then prioritizing skill 2s, then lastly, skill 1s. Now, looking at Diechi Rodian's skill 2, it discards the lowest ranked skill in all skill slots, meaning it prioritizes skill 1s. This is the most common type of discard, and is pretty simple. The next section that talks about selectable skills during the chaining phase just means it does not include the skills that are above the 2 skills in a skill slot, the ones that are semi-transparent and come down next, as you literally cannot select them. Now the second half of the definition. Defensive and ego skills do not count and are not removed from the dashboard. This seems very simple, and it is, but we'll be coming back to this a lot when talking about the IDs themselves, so keep this in mind. Then the last part of the definition. Discarded skills will not activate skill effects or coin effects other than the effects from discard and will not give ego resources. This is actually straightforward, no real tricks here. No one expects these to actually give the effects that they do, or ego resources. Now, let me clarify a bit more on this definition. The wording that is used on every discard effect is discard in all of this unit's skill slots. This is a little deceptive, and made me believe at first that it would discard as many times as there are skill slots. However, it will only discard 1 skill. It will just check all the skill slots to find the skill to satisfy the condition best. In fact, the only skill that discards more than once is Diechi Rodian's skill 3, which clarifies that it discards 2 skills. Maybe I was the only one who thought this and was confused, but either way, it is good to clarify. That's it about discard in general. It's one of those mechanics that's very simple on the surface, but there's a lot you can do with it, as you will soon see. I think discard is a lot of fun. The main draw of discard is getting to those higher tier skills faster. Like that commercial mentioned. Spamming through your skill 1s is probably the worst part of any ID. And discard IDs just rarely have that problem, leading to a much more streamlined, fun experience. But I'll talk more about discard and my thoughts on it as the video continues. So now, let's talk about the 3 discard IDs in the game. I'll be going in order of release, so Molar Yiseng, Diechi Rodian, and then Molar Otis. Let's talk about the most important thing first. How does skinny-armed, malnourished-looking, sleep-deprived Yiseng hold this thing? This weapon is nearly double his size. I guess if Molar Boatworks Sinclair can do it, this thing must be made of literal plastic. Anyways, in terms of skills, let's start with the classic discard fodder, the skill 1. Though calling this discard fodder isn't quite accurate. Stay Calm has a -2 to offense level, clearly meant to dissuade you from using it, since the main purpose of this skill 1 is to not be used. Therefore, the most important effect is the, if this skill is discarded, gain +4 tremor count. Indeed, all of the Molar IDs are self-tremor IDs. We'll talk about this self-tremor on the skill 3, but for now, just know that discarding this is good. In terms of actually using the skill, it actually has the average skill 1 roll of a 2-star ID, which is surprising, honestly. Before release, I expected this skill would really suck, like Chef Gregor or Zwyrodian levels of bad. But nope. In addition, it gives 2 tremor count to self on use, which helps you stay afloat if you happen to get 2 skill 1s on your dashboard, though you have other options if that happens. We'll get to it. If at 5+ tremor count, this also gains +1 coin power, making this roll a 13 total, which is pretty good. Again, I'm surprised they made this skill 1 weirdly usable. The -2 to offense level is not irredeemable by any means, and a 13 roll is still respectable. Lastly, this then inflicts 2 tremor count on hit. Next, the skill 2, Gamble, which is very different compared to this version of Gamble. This skill rolls a 16 and gives the same +4 tremor count when discarded. This is also the first skill that actually does discard, and it discards the lowest ranked skill in all skill slots. Then on hit, it inflicts 3 tremor count, and if the target has 5+ tremor count, it also bursts tremor and then reduces it by 2. I do not understand the obsession with applying tremor and then almost immediately using it all up, but it's better than her. And then the big skill, Grinding the Molars. This skill rolls a 13, which is not great, but of course, since this is a charge ID, there's a way to boost this up. But first, this discards the lowest ranked skill once again, then it spends 10 tremor count to increase coin power by 2, making this roll a 19 total, which is pretty good. Remember to bear in mind, you will cycle to this skill 3 much faster than other IDs would. So even though someone like Endglyph can get a 19 roll in his skill 3 practically unconditionally, and same with 7 Ryoshu, they actually have to go through their worst skills first. Yiseng's cycle is lightning fast in comparison. On the first coin, the skill inflicts 4 tremor, and then bursts it twice with the other 2 coins. This skill is pretty strong, and 2 tremor bursts is pretty good, especially combined with his passive, which inflicts defense level down when tremor is burst. The main thing to note is that the discard effect happens first for this skill, meaning if you discard any other skill, you will have that extra tremor count for activating your coin power condition. This means you essentially only need 6 tremor count on using this skill, so long as you don't have a defensive skill or another skill 3 as your other skill on the dashboard. Truthfully, it's hard to compare this skill 3 to the other 2 we have coming up with Diechirodian and Molar Otis, since those are just insane. But this is still a great skill for a 2-star ID. Lastly, let's talk defensive skills. This is what ensures you do not need to deal with the wall of skill 1s. Let's say you have a dashboard that looks like this. 2 skill 1s available to pick from, and a skill 1 lined up. This is a nightmare scenario for a lot of IDs, but discard IDs can simply hit the defense skill button. This will use the defense skill, which gets rid of it, and then the skill 1 is discarded, which leaves us with the 1 skill 1 we saw, and then a skill that is guaranteed to be good. That is about it for Molar Yiseng's kit, but I do want to point out how weirdly fast he is. 4 to 7 speed range is pretty nice, though it's not particularly relevant. Molar Yiseng is probably the most basic discard ID you can get, which makes sense considering he was our first taste of it. There aren't any particularly complicated things about his kit besides discard, and his animations are just alright in my opinion, so I don't think he's that fun to play. He certainly is strong though, due to cycling pretty strong clashing skills and having a semi-nuke on his skill 3. However, now let's talk Diechirodian. Diechirodian is significantly more complicated than Molar Yiseng, and that mostly comes down to the insight mechanic. Insight itself is just a number, and it can be 1, 2, or 3, depending on what skill you last discarded. Different effects occur based on the number that Insight is, and no skill is more reliant on Insight than her skill 1. First of all, this skill has 3 coins and rolls a 9 total, which is already pretty good damage-wise. If it is discarded, it gives Insight times 5% of max HP in shield health, which is always going to be 5% because you're discarding a skill 1, so Insight would be 1. To be honest, I do not know why that description is on her skills instead of just a flat shield amount. Maybe I'm missing something. Either way, the main thing here is the next line, which says if Insight is 2 or higher, gain coin power by Insight -1. What this boils down to is, if you discarded a skill 2 last, this skill gains +1 coin power, and if you discarded a skill 3 last, this gains +2 coin power. Needless to say, a 15 rolling skill 1 is pretty insane, especially considering the 3 coins. as well as the other ways Daiichi Rodian can boost her blunt damage. The last thing of note is lowering her stagger threshold on hit. The interesting thing here is that it is lowered by a flat 10. This, I believe, is the only one of these effects that lowers by a flat number instead of based on a condition or a percentage of damage dealt. It's a strong effect, I just wanted to point out that it's kind of a weird discrepancy between this effect as a whole. Her skill 2, Weight of Knowledge, has 4 coins and rolls a 15. The reason I point this out is because you will notice that Daiichi Rodian is just kind of overtuned when it comes to coins and numbers. She does a lot of damage, even disregarding discard. Either way, this skill gives 20% of max HP and shield when discarded, and discards the skill of lowest rank on use. It also gives Daiichi Rodian 5 aggro and gains 2 clash power if the target has 5+ sinking. Yes, this skill has 3 on-use effects, and with so many coins, surely she has a lot of on-hit effects too. Just 1, actually, applying 5 sinking on her last coin. Before I took a deep dive into Daiichi Rodian, I didn't realize just how few effects she actually has. It's kind of nice to have an ID with more of an emphasis on just hitting people really hard, with sinking as another bit of synergy, of course. Then, lastly, the skill 3, Excruciating Study, which is a whole 1 base power more than her skill 2. This skill gives 60% of max HP and shield when discarded. Why? I don't know. That's a ridiculous number, honestly, but it's good, so I can't complain. This is the only skill we have, like I mentioned in the beginning, that discards 2 skills on use instead of 1. This only has a use when she has multiple skill slots, but it can be good for that situation depending on how you want to play her. This also gives her 5 aggro and gains 1 more coin power when the target has 7+ sinking, which is easily achieved with the Rhyme Shank Ego, allowing this skill to roll a 20 total. It then inflicts quite a lot of sinking count on hit. The skill I think is most important to this ID is her defense skill, which discards the highest rank skill in all her skill slots, meaning you can target and discard that skill 3. But why does that matter? As I mentioned, the skill 1 gains +2 coin power if the last discarded skill was a skill 3. So if you get a skill 3 discarded via the defensive skill and use skill 1s, you can fire off 15 rolling skill 1s until you discard another skill, which is inevitable since you only have a limited amount of skill 1s to use until you're forced into a skill 2 or 3. Or that is what I would say if this line of the discard description didn't exist. So let's say you have just discarded your skill 3 and you have discarded no other skills after that, so you have 3 insight. You have 2 skill slots and here is what they look like. A skill 2 and another skill 2, then the other slot has a skill 1 and another skill 2. You know that some skill 1s are on their way and you want to maintain your insight, but you are forced into using a skill 2, which is guaranteed to discard your other skill 2 or the skill 1 in the other slot if it is not used. The answer is really simple, thankfully. Just place 2 defensive skills and use the top 2 skills. Now, you use a skill 2 and it looks for a skill that is able to be discarded. It scans its own skill slot and finds a defensive skill. So it moves on to the next one, and it sees a skill that is already in the chain and cannot be discarded. Then the only other skill is another defensive skill, meaning no discard occurs. So instead of discarding to get rid of those pesky weak skill 1s, now we have a super powerful skill 1 we can maintain and spam. Just keep the defense skills in the bottom row, and insight will never change, since no discarding can occur. This is the most fun way to play Daiichi Rodian in my opinion, but you can also play her similarly to Molar Yiseng, and keep discarding the skill 1s for a minor amount of shield, and firing off powerful 4 coins skills 2 and skill 3s. Personally, I enjoy the consistency of having skills that all roll at least a 15, which by the way, is insane that you can do that. There's another aspect of Daiichi Rodian that is important to discuss, and that is her passive. She gains blunt damage up next turn based on the amount of damage taken this turn. This damage includes shield damage. In addition, at 3 insight, 1 negative effect is removed from her at the end of the turn. Combine that with aggro, this means Daiichi Rodian is a tank who, when discarding her higher tier skills, can go on a rampage almost every turn, taking one-sided attacks and laying into the enemy with powerful skills regardless. This is all topped off with a pretty good 4 to 6 speed range and a 4 to defense level, meaning she isn't horribly slow and can take a beating no matter what. I genuinely think that this is one of the most broken IDs they have ever put into this game, in a solo context. With only 1 skill slot, Daiichi Rodian does suffer a little bit, but she is certainly still great, especially due to her innate Rhyme Shank synergy, fueling it maintaining the sinking, and gaining clash/coin power from it. While eventually she may become less discard oriented if you decide to become a skill 1 user with the 3 insight, discard is still a fundamental reason why she is so damn strong. And the last discard ID, for now, is Molar Office Fixer Otis. Compared to the insanity of Diechi, this ID is much more simple in her usage of discard, but also more potent in some ways. Her skill 1 is actually discard fodder, being a classic 1 coin, 11 roller, with the potential to roll a 13, but this skill really does suffer hard in the damage department. It gives 4 tremor count when it is discarded in classic fashion, but it also gives 2 tremor count on use, very similar to Muller Yiseng. Then, on hit, it lowers Otis's stagger threshold by the amount of tremor count on her to a max of 10. Capping this at 10 is cowardly, Project Moon. Let me spam the skill 1 and eliminate my stagger thresholds if I so wish. Utter tyranny aside, yeah, this skill 1 is not very good, which makes the discard all the more enticing. Thankfully, the skill 2 does just that, discarding the skill of the lowest rank in all skill slots, and also gives 1 offense level up when discarded itself. That effect is strange. I know what it was meant to be for, but 1 offense level up just is not that good of effect, especially considering how good the skill 2 is. This skill actually rolls really well, having the same numbers as Chef Ryoshu's skill 2 and Shank, which is to say a 3 base and 3 plus 5 coins, making this an incredibly solid skill 2 in terms of clashing and damage. The effects are alright, inflicting 2 bouts of 2 tremor for a total of 4, and then bursting tremor if Otis is at 6 plus tremor count. But then it reduces the enemy's tremor count by 1. Again, I don't really understand the point in keeping tremor so in check, but I suppose Project Moon doesn't want IDs that have tremor count conditions to be able to get those active too easily. But come on. Now we have the skill 3, Daring Decision. A floor of 4, coin power of plus 3 with 4 coins, so a 16 rolling nuke of a skill. And then it gains plus 2 coin power with 10 plus tremor count on self, spending it in the process. This makes Daring Decision roll a 24 total, which is just insane. Of course, this skill has the descending order discard, meaning it will prioritize skill 2s, or skill 3s if you have them. Thankfully, if Daring Decision is your top skill in the skill slot, and you do not want to discard your skill 2 to save it for another turn, you can always use your defense seal to save it for later. Though discarding your skill 2 will make you do marginally more damage, it's a very small boost, so personally I would avoid it if possible. You definitely don't want to get stuck with 2 skill 1s. That will effectively create a dead turn. In terms of actual effects, hoo boy. This inflicts 4 tremor and plus 3 count if you spent 10 tremor to activate it, and then burst tremor on every other coin in the skill, though it reduces the count by 1 every time, meaning this mostly goes neutral on tremor if you spent tremor count to use it, and 3 tremor negative for bursting 3 times if you did not. That is a little unfortunate, but you are bursting it 3 times, so it's not like you're spending 3 count for nothing. Especially when you combine those 3 tremor bursts with her passive, it means that those 3 bursts can potentially add up to 60 extra damage on a skill that is already a mini DDE-DR. I would be remiss to not mention Muller Otis's support passive. For a mere 3 sloth-owned, 1 ally with the most tremor count gains plus 1 tremor count from skill effects. This opens up a lot of pretty interesting synergy at the cost of not running a very strong tremor count ID, which is a trade-off I like. Spicebush Yiseng is the clear winner here. 1 skill 3 to give him 7 count, so that next turn he can fire off his skill 2 with AoE. However, Spicebush only gains tremor count on use, meaning he only gets 1 instance of benefit. IDs like Muller Boatworks Ishmael and Muller Boatworks Sinclair, however, gain benefits both times they gain tremor count via skill effects. I'll give you an example. Muller Boatworks Ishmael and her skill 1. This skill gives 3 tremor count on use and then 3 on hit. With the passive hitting her, it gives 4 on use and 4 on hit, leading to a much faster ramp up for her skill 3. So those are the 3 discard IDs currently in the game. But to be honest, I don't have that much to say. Unlike something like Charge, where I could literally rant for hours, discard is just fun, and I like it. I do wonder if we get a skill 4 or even a skill 5 in the future, how that would affect these types of IDs most of all. However, I do think discard can lead to a bit of a slippery slope. As I mentioned, Daichi Rodian is very strong, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think she is very fun, but eventually you create an ID that has no real weaknesses. She clashes at a 15 on all of her skills if you do the skill 1 strategy. However, this is mostly kept in check by needing multiple skill slots to become incredibly strong. And going solo has its ups and downs, so for now, discard is a mechanic that I think is well implemented and fun. I also totally predicted how it would work. Either way, that's all from me. Next week, I will be finally talking about my worst IDs in Railway Run, so look forward to that. In the meantime, this video ends now.